I'd like to share some information with the panel, and then I will start the questions again. Because some of our speakers, sometimes we have said that there is no crisis or there is a crisis, so there's an argument there. Yesterday, somebody took a very quick poll as to how many people in the audience were educated by public schools. And it was as if it was a 99% of the audience were educated by public schools. And the next question was, how many of you would send your children to the public schools that you went to get educated? And less than 2 or 3 people put up their hands. So obviously there is a crisis in education in Nigeria. Now, listen to this. Nigerians are spending $1 billion to send their children to school in Ghana. In Ghana. In the UK, we're spending $3 to $4 billion, and in the US, we're spending about $5 billion a year to educate our children. We're creating jobs for teachers in Cyprus, in Turkey, in France, all over the world. My question, and I'm going to go to Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. It is obvious there is a crisis in education at all levels. Now, what are the solutions? How can we solve this crisis? We mustn't keep congratulating ourselves that we're doing well when it is obvious that we're failing. Your speech clearly spelled it out that the problem has gotten worse since 7 years when you were Minister of Education. So let us be practical and let us tell ourselves the truth for once. Thank you.
I thank you very much for bringing us back to the necessity to be urgent about the crisis we have on our hands. You know, Chidi, with all due respect to you, I am sorry, there's nothing cheering about having more than 80% of our children trapped in failing public schools in the country. That's the reality. For as long as we have failing public schools, we're not going to build an equitable society. It's impossible. And the reason that we all became part of the elite in the society is because of public education. Public education is the most important tool for social and economic mobility. And so what we need is to launch a massive and aggressive redemption of the public school space, which then means that the governance for education needs to be on the top of the agenda of this nation. Every other conversation that we're having on how to share revenue is not as important as the conversation on how we're going to govern education. Because we're basically all suffering from the negative externalities of failure to provide education that transforms the lives of citizens. It's not something that started today. It took many years in happening. But if we played the game of saying it is not there, we are basically sowing the seed for social destabilization of the society. And you don't want that. So one of the things that an agrarian society did, and that's, thank you for talking about Singapore, but another society had to solve this kind of a problem. Finland. Finland is hardly mentioned when people talk about economies that have really transformed themselves, but they are a sterling example. It was an agrarian society maybe 40 years ago, and then it decided that it was going to change the story, and it did this through its human capital development strategy. It basically was about education. And one critical thing they did was simply to make teaching the most important profession in Finland. Now, research evidence has proven their strategy to be correct. 60% of what determines the quality of learning outcomes or academic achievement is the teacher quality. So if you're going to transform education, you need to focus on how we would get the teacher back to be the king of this palace. The second agenda that they focused on was what I said about early child care education. They simply said it's not good enough for a few of our elite to offer a head start to their children, while the rest of the society would come into the school system when their brains would have ossified. So what they did was to try and make sure that everyone, every child, could get early child care education. And they did this on a low-cost basis. Understanding that, we worked with one country in Africa while I was at the World Bank, Mozambique, and we experimented this matter of early child care education, and the results were just awesome. We need to challenge our status quo. The status quo ain't good enough, Chidi. We need a new normal for education. That new normal is possible even with the resources that we currently have. We need to look at the governance of education budget. What is the value for money that we are getting? A typical education budget, when you decompose it, is made up of investments in building the fences, building this, building that, and people just begin to celebrate transactional activities. When the real issue that has to do with human development is neglected because, of course, there is no opportunity for the typical rent-seeking behavior. We need to call a spade a spade. It is not an agricultural implement.
Thank you. And before I go back to the panel, I'd like to take one or two questions from the members of the audience so that we can make this as interactive as possible. I know some of you may have some urgent questions which you believe that any member of the panel or the entire panel can address. And I'll take one question from my left, the gentleman standing on the second row. If there's anybody there with the microphone, and then one question from there, the lady, and then one from the middle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen.
Say your name.
Godswill is my name, Professor Godswill Obioma. I'm the Executive Secretary of Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council, a parastatal under the Federal Ministry of Education. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts and provide information. One.
Just make it snappy.
I need to provide information. The incorporation of early childhood care in education has been done. It's going to take off, please just hold on, I'm giving information. It's going to take off 2014. In reviewing the national policy, government thought this critical aspect is very important to grow education and learning. And so it is there. That's number one. Number two, I thought too that in thinking about the purpose of education, we should think of the philosophy. What do we want to be? The national policy on education has been revised. We need to ask ourselves in this audience, is that revision in compliance with global competitiveness? Are there new things to put in there? Nobody has mentioned that. Three, we need to ask ourselves, post-2015 agenda, where are we going? Nobody has mentioned that. The world has departed from access. The world is focusing on equity. The world is talking about growing global citizenship. The world is talking about social skills of the 21st century. As the UNESCO arena, the platform, the playing level is, where do we go? And I do tell them, in country-specific terms,
thank you.
We should think about where to go. In 2015, post-2015 agenda, we need to think about that. And finally, sir, just finally,
thank you very much.
Finally.
No, it's okay. We've got 3 comments from you. Let's go to the other school. We're run out of time. Come, there's somebody, the fair lady, stand up.
Good morning. Mine is actually not a question.
Your name?
I apologize. My name is Mariam Lemu. Mine is an additional contribution. Yesterday, there was a lot of comments that were made about not reinventing the wheel. I think it's so important we look at certain things that have already been established. There was a report by UNESCO that for developing countries, you need to put aside or invest no less than 26% of your budget on education. That's so simple. Ghana has invested 31% in 2014 of their budget towards education. Nigeria's budget for education is 10.63. There is no way we are going to overhaul our education system if nobody is fighting to move it to the minimum that is required. I think, as you just heard somebody say, we need to call a spade a spade. It's not about transforming our education system. We need to overhaul it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to go around and look at best practices. I am so glad that someone mentioned Finland, because they do have a fantastic, they have the best education system in the world. But if we don't try and aspire to be like Finland, go to those countries that were colonized by Britain, Ghana, for instance, Malaysia, Singapore, and so on. You find we are sending our children to be educated by them. They aren't sending our children to Nigeria to be educated. What's going wrong? We need to call a spade a spade. We need to simply look at their best practices and see how we can adopt it. But the most important thing, instead of the clumsy things we do, which is to roll out new programs, we need to test them first with pilot programs first, adopt them, see how they work for us before we roll them out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And one more, but I think this should be a question. If you have a question, just one person in the middle.
Thank you very much. My name is Iyabo Awokoya. I'm in a private sector consultant on educational matters. My question really is to say that we've all analyzed a lot of problems about the system. I would like to ask if there's no possibility that the federal government, which has shown a lot of Fs, even if it was 2006, data that we're looking at, isn't it possible for them to take their hands a little bit off education and let most of it concentrate in the states and let the states actually develop? Because Lagos State has shown us that it works, that when you know your own problem and you're able to put it within and situate it within your own context, that you can actually get a lot of achievement. I happen to have been with ECO project, so I understand how the transformation has occurred. So, and Osun State seems to be doing the same thing. But if we have this global control by the federal government, are we sure we don't have an issue with the global control? That's one. The second point and the second question is, we keep going round and round in some sort of circles. It's like a catch-22. We need good teachers. The universities are turning out to us teachers that don't seem to be competent. These same teachers came from a system of education that is here. Yet somehow or the other, within this same system, we have private schools who are sending majority of their students out, and the minute they get into these international countries, England, everywhere, they do well. So I don't understand, like the gentleman said, I don't understand why it seems to be that we focus just on the problem. Can the government do a sort of charter system in which some money goes to the private sector and the schools, the children are sent there to at least show that we have some standards here. We can borrow from some of our standards here and not just always concentrate on all the things that are here are a problem. Thank you.